Good afternoon, and welcome to the 10th Annual Climate Leadership Awards. I'm Jennifer Kaminsky, Director of Outreach and Communications with the Climate Registry. We were very much hoping to connect with you in person. I know a lot of us climate leadership veterans are missing what is usually a celebratory show over dinner and drinks, but rest assured, we all look forward to doing that again soon. In the meantime, we've got a new and exciting way to present our 2021 award winners, providing them a stage to share their insights and lessons learned with all of you. For those of you who may be new to the Climate Leadership Awards, welcome. This is a national awards program that recognizes the outstanding work of organizations and individuals who are leading the way in managing and reducing greenhouse gas emissions and building climate resilience. The Climate Registry and C2ES have been presenting these awards for a decade now, after first launching the program under the leadership of US EPA. Since 2012, the Climate Leadership Awards have honored almost 200 companies, organizations, and individuals from diverse sectors across the US. Over the next hour, you'll be hearing from this year's award winners across 6 categories: excellence in greenhouse gas management goal setting, excellence in greenhouse gas management goal achievement, innovative partnership, supply chain leadership, organizational leadership, and individual leadership. Winners from each of these categories will share with you their tricks of the trade, and you're not going to want to miss their inspiring last words of the show. As we embark on this critical decade for climate action, we don't have a second to lose. On behalf of TCR and C2ES, I'd like to congratulate the 2021 award winners for being part of the solution to climate change. Before I hand it over, a few housekeeping items. To learn more about the award winners and their achievements, visit our website, climateleadershipconference.org, under awards. We are recording the entire session, which you'll be able to access by going to replay on the left side of your Hopin screen. On the right side of your screen, feel free to use the chat function to connect with the audience, or next to it, in the People tab, you can search and connect with specific colleagues. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Amy Holm, TCR's Executive Director, who will have a conversation with our first of 3 Organizational Leadership Award winners. Hi, Amy.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here today to celebrate our incredible group of 2021 award winners. The Organizational Leadership Award recognizes organizations that not only have their own comprehensive GHG inventories and aggressive emissions reduction goals, but exemplify extraordinary leadership in their internal response to climate change, outstanding engagement with their peers, partners, and supply chain. And these are organizations that are really redefining what climate leadership is in the United States and beyond. So our first Organizational Leadership Award is to Microsoft, and speaking on their behalf today is Elizabeth Wilmot. Congratulations and welcome, Elizabeth.
Hello, thank you so much. Such an honor.
You've earned it. You and Microsoft have definitely earned it. So I want to talk a little bit about the actions and the activities that you have been taking. So Microsoft has made a commitment to be carbon negative by 2030 and to remove all the carbon that Microsoft has emitted since its founding in 1975 by 2050. Can you tell us a little bit about your plans to reach these goals?
Absolutely, thank you. We set this commitment in January 2020 after our executives asked us to be bolder on climate change. They saw that climate change was a defining existential crisis of our decade and our century, and that they knew that those who could afford to do more should. And so we set out to establish a goal that we hadn't heard of before, we hadn't thought of before, and that was to be carbon negative. And the way we define that is to reduce more than half of our value chain emissions by 2030 across our scopes 1, 2, and 3. So across direct emissions, electricity emissions, what we buy and what we sell. And we will do that by driving our scope 1 and 2 emissions to near zero, electrifying our transportation, and purchasing 100% renewable electricity by the middle of the decade. And then, as you said previously, to remove the rest, to remove the residual hard to abate emissions, not only on an annual basis, but actually go back in time, so to speak, and cover the equivalent of our remaining emissions since 1975, our founding. And
Go ahead, please continue.
Oh, I was just going to say that we've published lessons learned on those experiences. We think it's really important to be transparent because we are doing early homework on this, and we see that it's not really the domain of one company, but it's the whole planet that needs to be in collaboration on this.
Oh, that's so great. Just leads me into my next question about what advice that you can provide to other organizations, given your experience in really taking head on these activities and learning from them. So Microsoft also committed to using 100% renewable energy procurement target approved by the Science-Based Target Initiative. So for other organizations considering a similar path, what advice do you have for them?
It's a great question. Well, back in 2012, we had actually set our first commitment to be carbon neutral, which included a commitment to be 100% renewable at that time, which was through the purchase of renewable energy credits, was a starting point. And that was to mitigate the impact of our cloud business. And now we've expanded that to cover not only our direct and electricity emissions, but also our gaming business and our device business. And that is all supported by and driven by our carbon fee. We have an internal carbon fee that we charge to all business groups for their greenhouse gas emissions. We collect those funds, and then we reinvest those in decarbonization and other sustainability activities. And that has become not only a funding source, but also a behavior driver. And so we set that fee actually at $15 a ton because we knew that that was the price our businesses would want to avoid and would want to therefore invest in their own renewable energy. So to us, it's been this interesting sort of flywheel and helpful flywheel.
Well, so commendable, and we look forward to see what Microsoft continues to do in the future. Thank you so much for sharing, joining us here today, and again, congratulations on your award.
Thank
you. I'd now like to introduce Chelsea Hazenauer, TCR's Senior Manager of MRV Initiatives, who will introduce the winners in the Greenhouse Gas Goal Setting and Goal Achievement Award categories. Chelsea, take it away.
Thanks so much, Amy. The first award category that I have the pleasure of presenting is for excellence in greenhouse gas management, and it's the Goal Setting Certificate. This certificate recognizes organizations that have publicly set aggressive GHG emissions reduction goals and then track their progress towards achieving these goals using third-party verified GHG emissions inventories. I'm pleased to announce that the 2021 winners of the Goal Setting Certificate are BMO Harris Bank, CSX Corporation, ICF, and NRG Energy. I'd now like to share a short video featuring these winners and some of their insights.
So setting a meaningful goal requires leadership support, technical depth, and a willingness to take risks. ICF leadership prioritizes climate action. We were the first professional services firm to be carbon neutral back in 2006, and climate has always been our priority. The technical depth is even more critical for us because with the significant progress we've made already, we really needed to dig deeper. And because this is our business, we set a high standard for our own target.
Setting that science-based goal is one thing, but identifying the levers to achieve that goal requires the involvement of subject matter experts from across the organization.
It allowed us to show the commitment that our employees and our customers and our communities that we operate in are seeking from us.
As the only power company in North America whose 1.5 degree C climate goals have been validated by the Science-Based Target Initiative, our goal has facilitated access to climate financial instruments like our sustainability-linked bond, which we were the first to issue in North America in late 2020.
We found that target setting and public greenhouse gas reporting, it's a real opportunity for businesses to be transparent.
Using a net zero lens to evaluate our operations is helping us expand our vision and improve our efficiencies.
You know, since 2008, we've set and achieved 4 successive emission reduction goals. And in 2020, we set a new target to reduce our operational greenhouse gas emissions 30% by 2030 versus a baseline year of 2019.
ICF committed to continue to lead in climate ambition. We push ourselves to be climate leaders, which includes setting more and more ambitious targets. Our leadership readily endorsed our science-based target and immediately challenged us by asking, what's next?
Congratulations to all of those winners for setting aggressive GHG reduction goals. I'd now like to introduce the winners of the Excellence in Greenhouse Gas Management in the Goal Achievement category. This award recognizes organizations that achieve significant GHG reduction goals and confirm that they've met those goals through third-party verification of their GHG inventories. The 2021 winners of the GHG Goal Achievement Award are Bank of America, Kimberly-Clark Corporation, Pitney Bowes, and Wells Fargo. Now let's hear from this group of impressive leaders.
Looking at being more energy efficient in our operations overall. And by the way our business changed and adapted over the prior, say, 7 or 8 years, we did a lot of site consolidation and we moved into more modern, more efficient locations. And we were able to improve our average electricity use by 27%.
The only way to make sustainability really sustainable is to embed it into the DNA of the people that are actually doing the work every day.
Take a holistic approach combined with the development of a long-term vision.
There's layers to this work that really have a significant impact on the communities that we live in and serve.
Sustainability is really at the heart of our business. Everything starts with understanding your operations, your activities, and the impacts on the environment. To do this, you have to work with everyone, with all of your stakeholders.
Developing a joint shared planning in general for sustainability, in particular for energy and climate, is key.
We've committed to achieving net zero before 2050, covering our financing activities, our operations, and our supply chain. In addition to that, we will continue to set short-term targets and in fact already announced our 2030 targets for our operations and our supply chain earlier this year.
So last year in 2020, we launched the 5th generation of the sustainability program. It's called Ambition 2030, and particularly for carbon footprint, we have a science-based target initiative approved goal for scope 1, 2, and 3.
Congratulations again to all of the winners in the GHG goal setting and achievement categories. I'd now like to reintroduce Amy Holm, who will chat with our second Organizational Leadership Award winner.
Thanks, Chelsea. Now I'd like to congratulate United Airlines for winning in the Organizational Leadership category. And joining me today is Lauren Riley, Managing Director, Global Environmental Affairs and Sustainability. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, Amy. How are you? Great, I'm great, and it's so good to have you with us today. I have a ton of questions for you, but we only will have a time for a few. But the first thing I wanted to ask you was about the GHG reduction goal that United has set. So United Airlines was the first US carrier to set a GHG reduction goals. And the goal has been to commit to a reduction of 100% of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by 2050. So how is the last year and a half and the pandemic affecting the airline industry? How has that impacted the plans to reach those, to head towards those goals?
Well, first, I'd like to just stop and say thank you. We at United Airlines really appreciate the recognition. All eyes on climate ambition right now are great and well put because we've got a lot of work to do. So yes, this last 18 months for aviation has been pretty tough. It's been a hard couple of months from the pandemic to the contracting company itself and the industry at large, and really trying to return to flying, but it just doesn't seem to be a very straight path. But despite all of that, and despite the constraints and the challenges presented by the pandemic, United Airlines has really doubled down on its commitment to climate issues. I mean, I think we can all recognize that this truly is the decade of action. And for those of us that are working within hard to abate industries like aviation, we have a heck of a lot of work to do, and we're not shying away from that. Last December, United made a commitment to reduce its emissions 100% by going net zero by 2050. And we call that our pledge to 100% green. And the reason we say it that way is because our pledge is to really achieve that outcome without relying on voluntary carbon offsets. And what was really interesting about this discussion right in the heart of the pandemic was when we were saying, should we commit to this goal of net zero? We actually had a very constructive and creative discussion around what does it mean to declare net zero? And when we make that pledge, what does it mean to us as a company? And very quickly, we determined that if we're going to be genuine in our intention, authentic in what it is we're trying to accomplish, we shouldn't be doing it by paying for a transaction that happens outside of our operations. So that was really important to us when we stood up and said, it's time to go 100% green. And I'm really pleased to also share that since then, just last month, we made an interim goal. By 2035, we will reduce the carbon intensity, so per passenger mile traveled, by 50% compared to 2019. So for an airline and an industry that's looking to go back into growth because we've constricted ourselves in our operations so much because of the pandemic, that is a very ambitious goal. And so for us, the pandemic was tragic in so many ways. I will suggest perhaps the only silver lining in all of that is that we had a moment to reflect on our values, and sustainability and climate ambition was absolutely core to that.
That's really exciting to hear. And another area that United Airlines has been a leader in is sustainable aviation fuel. So can you tell us a little bit about what that means for air travel and what other innovations we can expect in the future from United?
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we talk a lot about fuel, and we talk a lot about climate ambition all together. And the reason that happens is that 98% of the greenhouse gas emissions across United Airlines is from combusting the fuel on our airplanes. It's from flying our jets in the sky. So when you talk about climate ambition and really taking a stand to tackle those emissions, you have to talk about the fuel. Today, our technology and the engines that we have in our aircraft, they require a liquid-based fuel. And instead of having a fossil-based fuel or conventional Jet A fuel, we are working really hard to scale an alternative market for sustainable aviation fuel. What's great about this solution is that it's liquid-based. You can drop it into our airplanes. You can use it in the existing fueling infrastructure at our airports. The problem is that there's just not enough of it. So we're working really hard to really push for scale and commercialization and price parity, because the minute we're able to replace conventional Jet A fuel with this sustainable aviation fuel, we can reduce our emissions 80% or more. And so it shows tremendous promise. So that's one of the areas that United has doubled down on. We've also made great commitments to carbon capture. And carbon capture is one of those areas where we do recognize that we're first and foremost, we're going to try to reduce the emissions from flying, but we recognize that there's still going to be some emissions out there. So how do we remove them? And certainly that is a role that carbon capture and sequestration plays in the whole value chain. We invested in a company called 1.5 that uses direct air capture, so capturing the CO2 around all of us in the atmosphere and sequestering it underground. And what's really exciting about that project, Amy, is that one of those plants alone will reduce as much CO2 from the atmosphere as 40 million trees. So in terms of scale and impact, it's gigantic. And it's definitely a technology that's going to be important to the pathway of decarbonizing aviation.
Definitely. Lauren, thank you so much for your insights. And again, congratulations to you and to United Airlines. And now I'd like to turn it over to Amy Bailey from C2ES to present on the Supply Chain Leadership Award. Amy?
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Bailey, Director of Sustainability and Engagement at C2ES, and I'm honored to present the winner of the Supply Chain Leadership Award today. This award recognizes organizations that have their own comprehensive greenhouse gas inventories and aggressive emissions reductions goals, and who are also at the leading edge of managing greenhouse gases in their organizational supply chain. The 2021 winner of the Supply Chain Leadership Award is MasterCard. So let's hear from MasterCard.
It's important to have data transparency. And so to do that, we have a multi-pronged approach. We invite suppliers to disclose their information to the CDP. We've received an A rating from the CDP for supplier engagement for the last couple of years running. And that's really the tip of the spear for us to try to get information from our supply chain and get that both out into the public and also into our hands to better understand our supply chain emissions makeup. We invite to disclose. We also educate and develop based on what we receive from suppliers. So that's whether that's helping with emissions inventories for a supplier that's just starting out on their journey, science-based target setting, to emissions allocation, and then finally to ideas for mutual efficiencies and reductions. Moving forward, we're looking to broaden our collaboration efforts to suppliers in different economic sectors, different sort of business units and parts of our business, so that we can build templates to sort of replicate and cascade these supply chain actions and kind of really deepen the engagement with our supply chain. And we're looking to do that in the coming year as well. So have to keep the action going and keep the positive trend moving forward.
Congratulations. Now, moving on to our Innovative Partnership Certificate winners. This award category recognizes organizations working collaboratively on cutting-edge climate initiatives. These partnerships have collectively established objectives to measurably address greenhouse gas emission reduction goals and/or adaptation and resilience activities. The 6 partnerships that we are recognizing today include collaboration with many organizations, truly showing the power in numbers. The 2021 winners of the Innovative Partnership Certificate are, in no particular order, Teaching Climate Change in California, a partnership of California Department of Water Resources and the Water Education Foundation. The Los Angeles 100% Renewable Energy Study, or LA100 project, organized by the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power in partnership with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. MCE, a local partnership for a community choice aggregator. The Chicago Regional Climate Action Planning Partnership, a partnership of the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, University of Illinois, Argonne National Laboratory, and the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit team. The United States Climate Alliance. And last but not least, the Volvo Lights Project, a vehicle, charging, and workforce development partnership between Volvo Group North America, South Coast Air Quality Management District, NFI Industries, Dependable Highway Express, TEC Equipment, the Port of Long Beach, the Port of Los Angeles, Southern California Edison, CalSTART, UC Riverside Center for Environmental Research and Technology, Reach Out, Rio Hondo College, San Bernardino Valley College, and Green Lots. This is a truly diverse and impactful group of winners, so let's hear what insights and advice they have to share.
The innovation behind our project regarding climate change is the fact that it's built on local action in communities large and small throughout the Chicago region.
So LA 100 is the first study of its kind for an electric grid as large and complex as ours.
The U.S. Climate Alliance provides a platform and a space, resources to help our governors collaborate, innovate, and act on climate solutions. And what we're doing is working. We're seeing results. Alliance states have collectively outpaced the rest of the country in both emissions reductions and economic output.
Communication is the key from the get-go to help paving the way to a strong relationship. And I think in this case, the Department of Water Resources knew what they wanted and who could make it happen, which was us, the Water Education Foundation. And I think we've worked on other projects together. So we've always had that foundational relationship building between our two organizations.
The key to success is to understand and respect the concerns and challenges of key stakeholders. And if solutions don't address these fundamental needs and concerns, the project is not going to succeed.
To begin anything is to begin the conversation, recognizing and acknowledging that climate challenges are here, that the climate crisis is upon us. To begin that conversation and then to transition that conversation into action and actionable ways that communities large and small can take measurable steps to make a positive impact is critical.
Focus on listening to the needs of those you're serving. A partnership is strongest when all parties work together to build something that supports everyone.
Hi, everybody. I'm back to introduce our third and final Organizational Leadership Award winner, Entergy. And representing them today is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, Leo Denault, who is also an individual award winner. Welcome, Leo. You're going to be doing double duty today as you'll also be on our next panel, too.
Okay, great. Well, it's nice to see you and glad to be here. Wish you were actually here. With us.
Exactly. We do too. We will be back. We're coming.
Great.
So Entergy, first of all, thank you again for your sponsorship, your generous sponsorship of our conference and award ceremony this year. Entergy has committed to achieve net zero emissions for scope 1, 2, and some scope 3 categories by 2050. What does the path to net zero look like for you, and what role do you see advanced technologies playing in the longer term?
Yeah, that's a great question, Amy, and one that we've been working on for 20 years. Because as you know, we were the first utility in the United States to voluntarily limit our greenhouse gas emissions. We started this process back in 2001, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic for me to have been here this whole time, because I remember when we first did that. I don't think our peers took much notice, and stakeholders like our investors didn't really seem to be all that interested in what we were talking about. But we've progressed significantly over that period of time to where we've significantly reduced our emissions as we've transitioned our generation fleet. We've continually been able to meet or exceed our emissions targets. The first one we put out, like I said, in 2001 was to hold our emissions levels flat. Then we upped that game to be able to reduce our emissions so that by 2030, we expect to have an emissions rate that's 50% of what our 2000 levels were, and then net zero by 2050, as you mentioned. And what we've had to do is transition our generation fleet to be able to do that. And that's continuing to operate our non-emitting nuclear fleet. So in the Gulf South here, we've got roughly 5,000 megawatts of capacity from our nuclear plants that produce emissions-free energy. While we've transitioned out of legacy gas and coal, we should be completely out of coal before 2030. And we'll have transitioned a lot of old, inefficient gas units into what has been a fleet of newer, more efficient gas units whose carbon footprint is 40% of that, of the legacy gas units it replaces. And then aggressive build out of our renewable portfolio. That'll only get us so far, but you mentioned new technologies and where we need to go with new technologies as we start to try to get to zero. We're going to have to develop technologies in storage, both short-term and longer duration storage, and make sure that we have flexible capacity that can operate such that we can meet peak demand needs or those needs, as I said, with long duration storage, when we have significant amounts of times where renewables will not operate efficiently, such that battery storage doesn't fit the bill. Where we're spending a lot of time and effort right now is in the hydrogen space. Because if you look at where our service territory is in Louisiana and Texas in particular, significant amount of hydrogen production, storage, transportation, and consumption is already going on. If we transition from gray to blue to green hydrogen, that's going to be a combination of us growing our renewables fleet to be able to provide that opportunity for the blue and green hydrogen to show up, even pink hydrogen out of our utilizing our nuclear fleet. But it's also going to create an opportunity to enhance the storage transportation structure so that we ourselves can utilize some of that hydrogen in assets that we will deploy. In fact, we've got several projects underway right now, most notably our Orange County Advanced Power Station in Texas, where that facility will be designed on day one to be able to use blended natural gas and hydrogen, with the anticipation that we will develop it reasonably quickly to 100% hydrogen capable unit. We have the transportation infrastructure, the production and the storage infrastructure in this part of the country to be able to make a fleet of plants that would be hydrogen capable to provide that long duration storage, in addition to advances in battery storage, small modular nuclear reactors, and other things that have been needed. But for us, we spend a lot of time in hydrogen because it's such an opportunity given where we sit.
Well, you're doing so much, and all these components will help you move on that road and that path to net zero and becoming more resilient as well, which is important, especially in the area that Entergy is operating. So look forward to hearing more later in our broadcast. But thank you so much for joining us. And again, congratulations to Entergy.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Amy.
Now it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Verena Radulovic, Vice President for Business Engagement at C2S. And Verena will be moderating the final panel of the awards showcase. Verena, over to you.
Thank you so much, Amy. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the two winners who are not able to be here today, and that is Michelle Vunatsos and Paula Gold-Williams. Michelle is from Biogen and Paula is from CPS Energy. So too bad they couldn't be here today, but I'm going to go ahead and move on to our conversation with our other four individual leadership winners and to learn from them how they have approached implementing climate initiatives at their organizations. With us, we have Celine Ramstein, Climate Change Specialist at the World Bank, Keith Kerman, Deputy Commissioner at the New York Department of Citywide Administrative Services, Don Wise, CEO of MCE, and once again, Leo Denault, CEO of Entergy. So I just want to say congratulations, because it is no small feat to try to move the needle within an organization to implement climate initiatives. Celine, I'd like to get started with you. For those that are less familiar with Celine's work, she co-founded the Sustainability Initiative an internal grassroots organization aimed at getting the World Bank to walk the talk on climate change. And Celine, you've pushed for institutional change at the highest levels of the World Bank. In an organization as massive as the bank, with several thousands of employees, this is no small feat. Can you talk about what the key to your success was, and what did you learn along the way?
Sure. Thank you so much, and congratulations to all the other winners, and thanks so much for having me today. And I really want to emphasize how much of a collective effort this was, and I really want to thank all the people who've pushed this effort along the way. And you mentioned, yeah, it is a big organization. We're throughout the planet, which doesn't make it easier either. But I think doing it at the World Bank was, in a sense, both easier and harder than doing it in other organizations from which we've heard before throughout the conferences. I think what made it easier is that climate change is part of our core mission. The World Bank is really committed on these topics. So when we went all the way to senior management to make the case to align our internal practices with the speeches we're making around the world, and to be very concrete, that meant we're helping countries to reduce their emission when we have a carbon budget internally that goes through the roof. So when we spoke about helping countries to reduce their plastic pollution, where internally we weren't necessarily recycling properly or reducing our waste as much as we could, that really resonated. And we got a very good reception at the top level to recognize that, yes, we needed to do something about it. What made it maybe harder is the complexity of such a big institution with, as you say, tens of thousands of employees, country offices throughout the world. And also, it is a big hierarchical structure. So it's not very common to have a group of kind of activist employees getting together, going all the way to the top to challenge management and say, we're simply not doing enough and we ought to do better. So that took a bit of courage and, on committed colleagues to get together and say, well, let's just try it and do it. But I think it was an extremely rewarding journey, because we got a very good reception in terms of setting targets, setting a vision. And now I think we're in the stage of actually delivering on the vision. And that might be maybe my second point, which is once you get people on your side, once you get people excited about the agenda, where the difficulty really lies is how do we do it? We are speaking about net zero, aligning our words with 2 degrees or 1.5. That's no small challenge. I mean, that really requires a deep change in our everyday practices. So the question of how do we do that, of understanding within the institution, who are your allies, what does it take, where does the financing need to come through, is really important. And maybe I'll just conclude on that point, which what I've learned along the way through all the people who worked with me in this journey is how many allies in how many different position throughout the institution you need. And they're not necessarily all with you from the beginning. You need to meet them where they are, understanding what their job is like, understanding what their constraints are. But once you can establish this relationship, my experience has been that we can bring them along with us. And if we have enough energy, enough passion, and enough motivation to continue, because it is a tiring endeavor, I think we can really bring about change. And that's what I've seen at the World Bank so far. We're really far from over, so we keep on pushing. We really have still a lot to do, but finding allies that can help us along the way is really key. So just wanted to make that point. I'll finish here for now.
Thank you, Celine. We may come back to you and ask some of those questions about the specifics of how you've done that. But what I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn to our next speaker, to Keith. Keith, you've played a tremendous role in electrifying the New York City fleet. You've done it through advancing fleet efficiency, as well as promoting and pushing renewable diesel and biofuel initiatives, which are really at the tip of the spear in terms of how municipalities are thinking about improving their fleets. And so you've done this extensively to address the gaps in the public's understanding of sustainable fleets, and you've also done it to partner with other organizations to accelerate change. Can you talk about this, how you've done this, how did you go about it, and what were some of the important things that you've learned?
Sure, and thank you, Verena, and thank you for recognizing New York City Fleet and what we've been doing. It's been a great program. All right, so I came out of the New York City parks system. I worked in Central Park for 17 years. I ran citywide operations for the parks. And, people love the parks. They come to get away from cars, to get away from the machine world. But we had these 2,000 plus vehicles we used to operate the parks. So we needed them. We had to maintain the parks and clean the beaches and take care of the trees, but we wanted to do so with as few emissions and as little environmental impact as we could, right? So if we have to operate equipment in the parks, do so in a clean way. So that's where we started back in 1994-95 with natural gas. Then Parks was one of the first users of hybrid vehicles. We knew what hybrids were before anybody did. First users of electric vehicles, including a lot of donations, and then biofuels. And we were using biofuels in park trucks and in park buildings going all the way back 2005. So when then Mayor Bloomberg appointed me to run the fleet for the city, and for 8 years under Mayor de Blasio, we took those initiatives from the parks and we brought them citywide. But I'll admit, NYPD, the fire department, the sanitation department, kind of tougher customers than the friendly environmentalists of parks. But we were successful. We were able to implement hybrid and now electric police cars, hybrid and biofuels in garbage trucks. Every ambulance in New York City today operates on biofuels and a hybrid plug-in system, combination initiative. And we were able to make these work, and we made them work, one, by looking for cost-effective solutions, right? A lot of these, environmentally friendly approaches actually save money. You're saving on maintenance costs, which is a huge cost for the city. We have 1,400 mechanics in our town fleet. You're saving on, of course, fuel costs. In some cases, you actually can keep the vehicles longer because they're not breaking down as much and there's less wear and tear. We use them in emergency services, right? I could not get through any day, if the biofuels that are in fire trucks or sanitation trucks, if the hybrid vehicles that are being used for policing, if those didn't work, if those weren't successful and reliable in the toughest applications out there, we couldn't use them. So we've been able to show that these technologies, they work, they're cleaner, they reduce emissions and the serious air quality issues that we all face, as well as the climate issues. And then they can work at the toughest possible application. So we kind of started at parks in a friendly environment, and then brought it into these really tough, critical, important emergency services operations. And we've only just begun. We're now, we went from hybrids and biofuels to now we're committing to go to all electric as soon as we can across 160 types of vehicles, as well as for the New York City school buses, which are 10,700 additional assets that we work with. But so really, it's been positive. It's been 25-year effort, but next 10 years will be the most critical. But really, showing that this stuff can work and be effective.
Thank you so much, Keith. I'm going to turn now to Dawn, a different coast, West Coast. Dawn, you've spearheaded local renewable energy generation projects, energy savings programs, and upgrade initiatives that improve the health, safety, and efficiency of homes and businesses across the 4 counties in the Bay Area that you serve. You've also expanded MCE's energy resiliency efforts, which are top of mind for many stakeholders now as we're kind of changing seasons and seeing the different weather patterns and shifts. Can you tell us a little bit more about this work specifically and how you see it evolving in the light of the number of extreme weather events that we're experiencing?
Yeah, of course. So my background is in environmental justice, and sustainability is a big part of what shapes my work at MCE. It's always been important to me to ensure that the work that we do is focused on uplifting communities who have been overlooked by our current systems. So MCE's programs and services use a multifaceted approach to address climate change, equity, resiliency, and energy independence. We have a number of programs. One that I'll highlight is delivering batteries combined with solar to help keep the lights on in our critical facilities, our community shelters, and for our medically vulnerable customers. In California, as you mentioned, the wildfire season is growing. It's growing both in length and intensity. Once again, we're experiencing another year of drought right now. And when we have dry weather and wind, sometimes our power lines have to be de-energized to prevent the threat of sparking new wildfires. This is referred to as PSPS events, or power safety shutoffs. This further impacts our vulnerable customers and our critical facilities, and it makes our programs for energy resilience even more important. And when we do have periods of rain, it often comes with mudslides and flash floods, heavy rains like we're seeing in other parts of the country. And this creates a need for even more resiliency because there are more emergency events. The underlying issue for us really is reducing or eliminating greenhouse gas emissions. So we offer customers access to renewable energy that helps with this. And we're continuously expanding access to clean technologies to further increase adoption. And the goal is, of course, we are seeing the climate crisis is here now. And so we're working to address it through these power supply choices that we're making. And the last thing that I'll mention is that, right now we're really focused on battery storage for a couple of reasons. First of all, we can help customers maintain power during system outages. And this could be life-changing for some customers who have a medical need for power and don't have the means to evacuate during an outage. And then secondly, we can take greater advantage of intermittent renewable resources. This means actually getting to 100% renewable energy on the grid as we increase storage capacity so that we can store up that solar energy that's produced in the middle of the day, get it onto the grid in the evening when the grid is more likely to be powered by fossil fuels. So with storage combined with renewables, we can get to 100% renewable all the time. Battery storage is just one of the programs we offer, but over the last 10 years, we've been able to help over 1 million people have access to clean energy, lower bills, and we've reduced 500,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide to help address the climate crisis.
All right. Thank you, Dawn. Very interesting. Great work that you're doing. Leo, we're going to bring you back on the stage for the third time today. We know you spoke with Amy earlier about the great work that Entergy is doing and that you're leading. Can you talk about some of the partnerships that you've initiated that are helping Entergy to meet its climate goals?
Well, that's great question, because obviously these aren't the kind of things that you can do in a vacuum. And today, one of the biggest partnerships that we're developing is a partnership we already had, but it's really shifting to a significant amount in the sustainability front, and that's with our customers. So first and foremost, what we're able to do today is not only, if you think about it, we're working on their Scope 2 emissions as we clean our fleet up, but we're also working with them as they meet their climate objectives on their Scope 1 emissions. And so what that involves is us working with them to electrify processes they have today that utilize fossil fuels, where we can use our growing renewable footprint as well as our nuclear power to be able to make it so that they become emissions free on their Scope 1 emissions. And these customers, in addition to the transportation sector, there's obviously a big industrial complex along the Gulf Coast, particularly in Louisiana and Texas, but also in Arkansas and Mississippi, where we serve as well, where they all have their own net zero objectives that by and large match up with our objectives, both their interim goals and their long-term goals. In addition to that, given that we're a regulated entity, we have to partner with our regulators to make sure that we're doing this in a way that benefits all of our stakeholders. As you all know, in our industry, there's a concept of universal access, and I know Dawn mentioned environmental justice. All of that needs to be taken into consideration, and environmental justice for us is not only the location and the operations of our facilities, but the price of our product, not only to our industrial customers, but certainly to our residential customers. So those are two really important partnerships as we move forward. On the technology front, we're partnering with a variety of folks as it relates to our renewable footprint, battery storage. One of our more interesting partnerships is with Mitsubishi, where we're developing the hydrogen operations that we hope to be able to deploy long term. I know all of us in the industry are racing to get to zero as fast as we can while we produce affordable and reliable energy. And Dawn mentioned storage. It's a big part of it. Battery storage is a big part of what we're already doing, but we need that long duration and seasonal storage that can only be provided by something that's controllable and dispatchable. And given the area of the country we're in, hydrogen makes a lot of sense. So we're working with Mitsubishi on developing a generating station that can utilize hydrogen as a fuel. We're working with Mitsubishi on electrolyzer to pilot creating green hydrogen that we could later utilize in our power plants. We have storage facilities within our footprint that are capable of being retrofit so that they can store hydrogen, and there's massive amount of hydrogen transportation infrastructure as well as production and consumption here in this area of the country. So that's a 10-year JDA with Mitsubishi to be able to provide the opportunity to develop the hydrogen infrastructure such that we can make a real dent in that last bit of technology that's required to be able to get us as an industry to zero. We're also working with a great and growing regional ecosystem of industry, nonprofits, and academic institutions, that all share really that common belief that climate challenges can also be opportunities. So a great example of that is a partnership we helped launch working with the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development, and that's the Gulf Coast Collaborative. And there's 30 members from different industry sectors, and we're all working on carbon reduction strategies that also really is in this part of the country can contribute to economic growth, from renewables and electrification to the hydrogen that I spoke of, and carbon capture and other sequestration options. So that's really important as well, to be able to get as much buy-in from the communities as we can. And obviously we're working with our supply chain partners to make sure that we help them manage their emissions, which obviously makes its way into our objective to eliminate our scope 1, scope 2, and work on our scope 3 emissions as well. So a lot of partnerships and more collaboration than we've ever had to be able to try and take this on.
One lightning round question for all four of you, and it's what I found really interesting about the conversation this afternoon, but also just really looking at the diversity of the awards that have been given. It's at all levels of the organization, from people that work within a structure to those that are sort of leading a particular division to all the way up to CEO. So everybody within their organization can play a strong role. I'd like to start with Celine and Keith, particularly since you've both been active in trying to push a rock uphill in your organizations and really get things to change. And then I'm going to transition to Dawn and Leo. But if everyone can give me a 1-minute answer on what is the biggest thing you've learned, or the best piece of advice you give to those that also want to ramp up their climate ambition and action. So thinking about your peers and what you'd like to say to them, how to ramp up climate ambition and action. Celine, I'll start with you.
That is a great question. I think my piece of advice to fellow young people, or maybe to myself where I was when we started that, is don't give up, just do it. What is really, I think, difficult when you're pushing this rock, as you said, is a discrepancy between what you will achieve and the daunting level of the climate challenge. I work in a lot of developing countries where I see firsthand the devastation of climate change. So I see that, and at the same time, I'm fighting to get, the recycling better at the World Bank. And sometimes you're like, I'm fighting so hard on top of my job and my free time for something that in the grand scheme of things is so little. But I think finding the balance of seeing the big picture, seeing what it would really takes to align our lifestyle, our organizations with what the IPCC tells us is needed to keep climate change and global warming within 2 degrees or 1.5 is a vision we need to keep and we need to have in the back of our mind. At the same time, we shouldn't get discouraged with that. And if all that you can do in your organization is pushing to get recycling or pushing to fly less, that's a first step. And I think that should be celebrated and that should be encouraged, because if you want to get people with you along the journey, you need to start somewhere. So don't feel bad about not doing enough. Just start somewhere, and from one step to the other, I do believe we can go further. But I think keeping the vision of how deep the transformation needs to be is quite important.
All right, you were muted. But
I was muted. I'm always muted.
I know.
Keith,
I knew what you were saying anyway. So following what Celine said, all right, so we talk to fleets all the time. And look, we're a big operation. We're a town fleet that's $1 billion a year spent. So we can do a lot of investment. We can try things that maybe every fleet can't do. But there are easy ways to start, and there are no-brainer ways to start. Hybrid vehicles. Most fleets haven't started with hybrid vehicles. Adopt a hybrid vehicle, you'll reduce fuel use, reduce emissions. You also save money, have acquired a more resilient vehicle. It's an easy place to start. Biofuels. Right? If you're going to try and do renewable diesel and switch out your entire fossil fuel program, that's pretty challenging. We're still working on it, and it's challenging. But biodiesel 5, biodiesel 10, biodiesel 20%. These can go in your trucks today seamlessly. In some cases, you'll save money. Biofuels in many cases are less expensive than diesel fuels. So you can save some money and start implementing very quickly. There are often tax credits as well. Use a plug-in hybrid. If you're not ready, if you're worried about range, you're not sure you can only be on a battery, go to a plug-in hybrid and you'll have the backup in gas. There are so many things. I'm up in the municipal building looking in the Brooklyn Bridge. Most of the vehicles I'm looking at right now are not hybrid or electric, right? There's enormous opportunity to get going. Like Celine said, get started in ways where you minimize any risk, right? You can have a cleaner vehicle. It'll actually be less expensive to maintain. It'll be more reliable. You won't break down. And then you get on that path and you start with a hybrid, and then soon you'll want that electric vehicle. You start with biofuels, soon you'll want the renewable diesel, but get going is our message.
Thank you, Keith. Don, I'll turn to you. From where you sit and what you've been through to kind of move your company forward, what advice would you have?
Yeah, I would say there are two things, but I'll say them quickly. The first is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We have a lot of work to do, and some folks will stall because they haven't figured out the perfect solution. We have to evolve and make it up as we go along. And the other thing that I think is even more important is the biggest piece of advice really is to look to your community for solutions and answers. Whether you're just starting your journey or looking to deepen your impact, there are so many folks already in the community doing the work. And by adding your voice to theirs, you can amplify the work and create lasting change. No one does it alone, and collaborating with the folks who are doing the work can make all the difference.
Don, thank you. And Leo, back to you. What advice would you give to those who ramp up?
I guess first of all the good answers are taken by the great answers that were already given. That's the benefit of going last. But I would say two things, maybe on the opposite end of this spectrum from Celine. In addition to making sure you get started, for me, one of the things I've learned is don't be afraid to go bold. People are capable of more than they think. And technology is capable of developing faster than we think, and that only happens actually if you go bold. Not So from where I sit, every now and then we come up with this is where we're going to go. And when we started this process 20 years ago with holding our emissions flat to 2000 levels, and then when we went to the 50% reduction in zero, I won't tell you that everybody in the organization said, "Oh, that'll be easy. Let's go." There was a lot of advice to me about, what are you thinking, man? That sort of thing. So don't be afraid to go bold. Now, everybody's bought into that. And then the other thing that I think I wish we could do more of, and that is make sure that we, in that world of collaboration that Dawn mentioned, it's not only with your communities, but with the people who potentially don't agree with you. I think we spend too much time in this debate and in this space, like we do in so many others, where if we sat down and we had an honest conversation, we all have the same objectives. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, it doesn't matter what title you have or what job you're doing, we all have the same objective. And if we were to sit down and start with that objective and work our way back to the solutions, I think we would make a lot more progress a lot more quickly than we do with the standoff part of the problem where we don't understand each other for a while. So I guess those are the two things that I would mention.
Thank you so much, Leo. And thank you to all of the panelists for being here today, for your award. Congratulations, and for your truly exceptional leadership. We really appreciate it. I'd now like to pass it back to my teammate at the Climate Registry, our other partner organization. As you know, TCR and C2ES co-convene the Climate Leadership Conference. Jennifer Kaminsky for some final words from her and from our group of winners.
Thanks, Verena, and congratulations again to an outstanding group of 2021 Climate Leadership Award winners for going bold, big and bold. I want to give them the last word, but just a couple reminders beforehand. I want to make sure you can learn more about the winners and their achievements on the Climate Leadership Conference website. And I'd also like to remind you that the Climate Leadership Series continues into the fall with expert-led webinars and workshops. Our first program is just around the corner, Thursday, October 28th, featuring a fireside chat with Apple's Vice President of Environment, Policy, and Social Initiatives, Lisa Jackson, followed by a discussion on natural climate solutions. More information on this series is coming your way. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We have another engaging day of programming for you tomorrow as we hone in on the global race to net zero. And now for a final bit of inspiration, here are some last words from our winners on what is giving them hope for a net zero, climate resilient future.
I've never seen this much action.
We're past this chicken and egg question.
But unless we act locally, we don't think anything will get done.
In the banking business, there's an openness to share lessons learned.
The ever-present ingenuity of our researchers and scientists has really catalyzed innovation.
Today, almost every company has an emission reduction goal.
It was so inspiring to see the next generation of activists taking the lead on fighting for climate equity and institutional change.
The convergence of NGOs, governments, regulators, companies, young people, and shareholders, all focused on driving us towards a net zero global economy.
We will be developing new strategy. We'll be developing new technologies.
People can relate to our actions. People are connected to what we're doing.
We have set in motion a force that cannot be stopped.
Thank you.